Wyoming Territory, June 1879. The wind carried the scent of pine and blood. Arietta Calder stumbled out of the burning house barefoot, dress torn, blood on her arms, not all of it hers. One hand clutched a rifle she barely knew how to use. The other dragged a small boy, maybe 7, coughing from the smoke. His sister, a few years older, clung to Arietta's skirt, her pale face streaked with soot, eyes too wide for her age. They had come fast, 3 men on horseback, faces covered. They shot her brother dead before he could reach for his pistol. Took what little food the family had stored. Set the place alight just because they could. Arietta got the children out, but not in time to save anyone else. She fell to her knees in the dirt, coughing, shaking, the rifle slipping from her fingers. Then came hoofbeats. She turned, ready to fight, teeth bared like a cornered animal. But the man who rode up slowed his horse 10 paces away and raised both hands. He wore a weathered brown coat, a wide-brimmed hat shadowing his face, and his horse was dust-covered but strong. He had kind eyes, the kind that did not leer. He saw the rifle, saw the children, and dismounted slow. "I am not here to hurt you," he said. His voice was low, steady. "Name's Silas Granger. I was riding south when I saw the smoke." Arietta did not answer. She just stared at him, shoulders trembling, one arm wrapping the little girl closer. Silas knelt beside her, not touching, just close enough to be heard. "You're safe now, all right? I will stay if you want, or I can ride into town and bring the sheriff." "Too late for a sheriff," she rasped. His eyes shifted to the house, now a black skeleton against the sky. "You hurt?" "No," he nodded once. Then looked at the children. "Yours?" "They were my brothers," she said. "He is dead." Silas looked at the boy, then the girl, then back to her. "What are their names?" The girl whispered, "My name is Sadie." The boy just coughed again. "His name is Seth," Arietta said quietly. "He is not talking much." Silas stood, took off his coat, and gently draped it over Seth's shoulders. "We ought to get you all warm. Night comes fast out here. There is a creek half a mile west. I have a camp there." Arietta hesitated. "Why are you helping me?" Her voice cracked, dry as dust. Silas looked at her, steady and calm. "Because someone should have." She stared at him, not speaking. He waited. Then slowly she nodded. The camp was simple bedroll, fire ring, a pot still warm with rabbit stew. He added water and stretched what was left. Arietta fed the children with quiet hands. She sat apart, shoulders tight, every movement deliberate, like she was holding herself together with thread. Silas did not ask questions. He cut more wood, kept the fire going, wiped soot from Seth's brow with a damp cloth. When the boy finally fell asleep, Sadie curled up beside him. Arietta stood then, arms crossed, eyes on the fire. "You said your name was Silas?" He nodded. "I am Arietta Calder." He nodded again. She looked away. "I do not know what to do." Silas tossed a stick into the flames. "I reckon you do not have to decide tonight." She glanced at him, wary. "You always ride around helping strangers?"
No.
"Most folks do not want it. Most do not need it." "Then why stop for me?" He met her eyes. "Because you are on fire." She gave a half laugh, bitter and short. Then she looked at the children. "They have no one. Just me now. You are not alone tonight." That quiet settled between them. Arietta sat down near the fire, her knees drawn in. She looked at him again, really looked. He had a scar along his jaw, half hidden by stubble. His boots were worn, but his rifle was clean. He moved like a man who had seen too much and learned not to flinch. "Where were you headed?" she asked.
Nowhere urgent.
She nodded slowly. "You could have left. I know, but you stayed." "I did." A long silence. The fire crackled. The wind moved through pine. She said, real soft, "Thank you." Silas just looked at her, something like understanding in his eyes. "You do not need to thank me. I am not doing this for that." The next morning, Silas saddled both horses. Arietta helped pack what little the children had left: a wooden doll, a silver locket, and a blanket half-burned. They did not speak much, but something had shifted. She did not flinch when he stood near. He caught her watching him once as he lifted Sadie onto his horse. She looked away quick. They rode toward the nearest town, Wheeler's Bluff, a place with one general store, a church, and a sheriff who spent more time drinking than doing anything useful. At the edge of town, Arietta pulled the reins. "We can go from here." Silas looked at her with quiet patience. "Go where?" She did not answer. He said, "You have no family left. No house. These children need more than a cot in the church basement. And you need more than a town that looks the other way." She gripped the reins tighter. "I do not want to be anyone's burden." "You are not. Then what am I?" Silas leaned forward in the saddle, not smiling, but not cold either. "You are someone who deserves a chance to breathe." Arietta stared at him, her throat tight. Sadie whispered from behind her, "Can we stay with him, Arietta?" The question hit her like a stone. She looked at Silas again. He just waited. She lowered her eyes, then nodded. They turned back toward the hills. That night, they made camp again near a ridge overlooking the valley. Arietta sat beside Silas while the children slept. "I could have died yesterday," she said. He nodded. "But I did not." "No," she looked at him. "You think that means something? Maybe it means you still have something worth living for." She swallowed hard. "I do not know how to do this." "Do what?" "Start again." He reached out, slow, and touched her hand. "Just once. You do not have to know. You just have to try." Arietta looked down at his hand, rough and warm, then back at him. "I want to try," she whispered. Silas nodded. And in that quiet space, with stars above and firelight between them, something new began. Not loud, not sudden, but true. A beginning. They stayed near the ridge 3 nights. Long enough for Seth to sleep through without waking in a cold sweat. Long enough for Sadie to begin humming again under her breath when she thought no one was listening. Arietta spent those days in motion, gathering kindling, stitching a torn hem, boiling water for sore throats. She moved with a quiet steadiness, as though keeping busy might keep the grief from catching up. Silas gave her space. He hunted early, cleaned game with practiced hands, tended to the horses with a calm that didn't ask for thanks. He didn't hover, but he didn't vanish either. His presence was the kind that didn't ask to be noticed. On the 4th morning, clouds rolled low over the hills, thick and silver. Silas stood at the edge of camp, adjusting the saddle straps. Arietta approached with a length of jerky wrapped in cloth. "You planning to ride out today?" she asked without looking at him. "I was thinking I might take a look down toward the old sawmill road," he said. "Tracks from the men who hit your place likely cut through there." "I thought you said the sheriff wouldn't care." "He won't. But I still do." She handed him the bundle, her fingers brushing his. "You don't owe me vengeance." He met her eyes. "It's not vengeance. It's the right thing." Her mouth tightened, not in anger, but in something unreadable. "You always this sure about what's right?"
No.
"But I know wrong when I see it." He mounted up and rode off. Arietta watched until the trees swallowed him. Later, while Seth napped and Sadie stacked stones into a lopsided tower, Arietta sat on a flat rock with a needle and the back of Silas's coat. The lining had come loose where it met the hem. She didn't ask permission, just threaded the needle and worked in silence, her stitches small and neat. By mid-afternoon, the sky broke open. Rain came soft at first, then steady. Arietta got the children under the oilcloth lean-to and crouched to adjust the canvas beneath them. She didn't hear Silas return until he was near enough to speak. "Tracked them to a widow's barn out near Dry Creek," he said, water dripping from his hat brim. "They'd moved on. Took her mule and left a man behind with a busted leg." Arietta looked up. "She alive?"
She is.
Shaken, but breathing. Arietta's jaw tightened. "They'll do it again." "Likely." She stood, brushing mud from her skirt. "Then what do we do? Wait for them to take another family? Not if we're ahead of them." "You mean to follow?" "I do." She crossed her arms. "You expect me to just sit here while you chase ghosts?"
No.
"I expect you to help me decide what comes next." That stopped her. "I'm not used to being asked," she said after a moment. "You've had too many folks telling you what to do? Or nothing at all?" He stepped closer, slow enough for her to feel the reins still clinging to him. "I don't have all the answers, Arietta. But I don't want to make choices for you. Not now, not ever." She looked at him, then really looked. "I can shoot," she said. "Not well, but I can." He nodded. "I can ride too. And I know how to keep a fire going in wind." He gave a small breath of something close to admiration. "That's more than most." "I want to find them," she said, voice low. "Not just for what they did to my kin. For what they'll keep doing. Then we'll ride together." She didn't ask what that meant for him, for them. But something settled in her chest then. Not peace, not yet, but the shape of it. The next morning, the rain gone, she helped strap down the packs while Silas checked the rifle he'd oiled by firelight. Seth stood beside her, holding her hand. Sadie climbed onto the back of the roan without prompting. Arietta looked at Silas as he swung into the saddle. "You sure about this?" He didn't smile. "I wouldn't be here if I wasn't." They rode out with the sun behind them, shadows stretching long over the grass. Arietta didn't look back. There was nothing left behind her but ash. Ahead, the road turned narrow, wove between cottonwoods and dry gullies. And beside her, Silas rode steady, the distance between them shrinking with every mile. They found the first sign of the raiders just past the dry gulch, where a scorched wagon will lay half buried in sand. A scrap of faded quilt fluttered from a thorn bush nearby. Silas dismounted to study the earth. Arietta stayed back, the children still atop the roan, her eyes scanning the hills as the wind stirred grit against her boots. "3 riders," Silas said, crouched low. One horse favoring the left foreleg. "They're not pressing hard, probably think no one's following." Arietta stepped closer. "How long ahead?" "Less than a day. They're riding careless." She glanced at the broken wheel. "They took from someone else." He looked up at her. "They always do." They pressed on, making camp near a creek choked with willows. Silas showed Sadie how to tie a snare using twine from his saddlebag. She listened close, hands small but steady. Arietta boiled water over the fire, her back to the wind, her hair pulled into a loose knot. When the stew was ready, she handed bowls to the children, then sat across from Silas, knees drawn up. "You ever lose anyone?" she asked, eyes on the flames. He didn't answer right away. Then he said, "My brother. Took a bullet in Kansas, spring of '68. Never saw it coming." She nodded, not asking more. "You?" he asked, voice quiet. "My husband. Fever, 6 days after Seth was born. My sister caught it too. She died the same week." Silas stirred the stew with the handle of his spoon. "That's a heavy thing." It was worse not having time to bury them proper. Ground was frozen. "We had to wait 3 weeks." He looked at her. "You did what you could." "I know." Her eyes met his. "But it still feels like I didn't." He didn't offer comfort, just met her gaze and held it. Later, she sat with Sadie curled against her side, brushing the girl's damp hair with fingers stiff from cold. Seth slept near the fire, one arm tucked under his cheek. Silas approached with a folded blanket. "You'll be warmer with this." She took it, fingers brushing his. You always carry more than you need? He shrugged. Habit. He didn't move away. She looked up at him. Why are you helping me? He didn't hesitate. Because someone should have. Her breath caught. It wasn't the words, it was the way he said them, like truth spoken plain. She said nothing more that night. The next morning brought frost and silence. The children rode with arms tucked tight beneath coats. Arietta's hands were red at the knuckles, but she rode upright, eyes forward. They came upon a burned homestead by mid-morning. The barn was still intact, but the house was gutted. Silas circled the yard, then dismounted and walked into the ruins. Arietta stayed back until he called softly. He showed her a boot print in the ash, deeper than the others. Someone stayed behind, he said. Slept here. Maybe last night. Arietta crouched beside him. Could be one of them. Could be someone running from them. He stood, eyes scanning the tree line. We'll follow the trail, but slow. I don't want to scare someone already half scared to death. They tracked the prints up through a narrow draw, past a rocky stream bed. By midday, they found her, a girl, maybe 16, crouched behind a fallen log with a knife clutched in both hands. Her dress was torn, and her eyes were hollow. Arietta held up both hands. We're not here to hurt you. The girl didn't move. Silas knelt, voice low. We found your place. I'm sorry. She didn't speak until Arietta stepped closer, real slow, and knelt beside her. My name's Arietta, she said. These are my niece and nephew. That's Silas. The girl's voice was hoarse. They came at night. Arietta nodded. They did the same to us. The girl's fingers uncurled from the knife. Her shoulders sagged. They brought her back to camp, fed her, gave her one of Sadie's spare blankets. She said her name was Eliza and that her parents hadn't made it. She didn't cry, just stared into the fire like she was somewhere else. That night, after the children were asleep, Arietta and Silas sat apart from the others. The embers glowed between them. She won't talk much, Arietta said. She remembers too much already. Arietta glanced at him. I keep thinking about what comes after. If we do catch them, what then? We find a place where no one's looking over their shoulder every night. And you? What do you do when this ends? I don't know yet. She looked down at her hands. I never thought I'd ride beside someone again. Not like this. He was quiet for a long time. Then, without looking at her, he said, You don't have to ride alone anymore. She didn't answer. But she didn't look away either. As the fire sank lower, she leaned back against a log, her shoulder brushing his. Neither of them moved. And in the stillness, something shifted unspoken, but understood. The trail pulled them north, through broken country where the land rose in red-bellied ridges and fell again into quiet, stone-lined hollows. Days passed in the hush of travel hoofbeats over frost-hardened dirt, campfires lit low behind rocks, the children bundled close under wool blankets. Eliza stayed close to Arietta, not for protection, but tethered by something quieter, a thin, wordless trust. They crested a bluff on the 6th morning, where a blackened oak stood alone against the sky like a sentinel. Below, in a shallow valley, smoke curled faint from a campfire too steady for settlers. Silas drew the horse to a halt, eyes narrowing. They're down there, he said, voice low. Arietta slid off her saddle and crouched beside him. How many? 3, maybe 4. Not moving camp. They think they're done running. She studied the smoke, then glanced at the children behind her. We can't bring them closer.
No.
We'll find a place to wait them out. Let them sleep heavy, then go in. She pulled her coat tighter. If this goes wrong, I want you to promise me something. Silas didn't look away from the valley. What is it? You make sure Sadie and Seth are raised somewhere quiet, somewhere they can grow upright. He turned to her then. You think I'd walk away from you? She didn't answer. He stepped closer, the wind tugging at his coat. "Arietta, I said I'd ride beside you. I meant it." She looked at him, jaw tight, but her eyes shimmered. "Then ride careful." They set up camp in a dry arroyo, hidden by scrub. The children stayed with Eliza, who kept her back straight even when her hands trembled while tying the lean to ropes. Sadie asked if they were going to a town soon. Arietta knelt and brushed a curl from the girl's face.
"Soon," she said.
"Just a little while longer." That night, under a moon sharp as bone, Arietta and Silas left their horses tethered and moved on foot. Silas had given her his second pistol, the handle worn smooth. She tucked it into her coat pocket, fingers wrapped tight around the grip. They reached the edge of the camp near midnight. The fire had burned low. Silas motioned toward a tree stump where one of the men sat slumped, a bottle hanging loose in his hand. Another lay snoring inside a canvas tent. Arietta's breath came slow. Her heart beat steady, but too loud in her ears. Silas moved first, quiet as creek water. He took the man at the stump in silence, tying his hands behind his back with a length of rope. Arietta crept to the tent, pistol drawn. She paused at the flap, listening. Then, with a breath, she stepped inside. The man inside stirred, eyes fluttering open. Before he could speak, she leveled the pistol. "Don't move," she said. He froze, blinking. "You remember the Calder house?" she asked. "You remember burning it down?" He opened his mouth, but no answer came. "I do," she said. "I remember everything." Silas entered behind her. The man's eyes went wide. Silas looked at Arietta. "You want to turn him over to the sheriff?" She didn't lower the pistol. "What for?" "So he can sleep in a cell till he runs again." Silas didn't answer. Arietta's hand didn't shake. "You killed my brother. You left children crying in the dirt." The man whimpered. "I won't shoot you," she said, stepping back, voice like flint. "But you'll walk to Wheeler's Bluff in chains. You'll answer." They tied the men, roused the third at dawn. Silas walked behind them with the rifle ready. Arietta kept pace beside him, her shoulders square. When they crossed the ridge where the blackened oak still stood, the sun broke low through the clouds, bleeding gold over the hills. They reached the arroyo by noon. Sadie ran to Arietta, arms around her waist. Seth stood blinking in the light, face wary until he saw Silas's nod. Eliza stepped forward and took the rope from Silas's hands, leading the bound men toward the horses without a word. That night, with the children asleep, Arietta and Silas sat near the fire. The wind had softened. The stars pressed close overhead. "You could have killed him," Silas said. "I wanted to," she answered. "But you didn't." She looked at the flames. "There's been enough of that." Silas leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I've seen a lot of people break. Seen good men lose themselves. I've come close." He looked at her then, not with pity, but with something steadier. "You didn't." Arietta turned toward him. The firelight licked across her cheek. "I couldn't have done this without you." Silas didn't speak, just reached out and let his hand rest over hers.
She didn't pull away.
"I don't know what comes next," she said. "I do," he answered. "We find a place, not just for the children, for us." Her breath caught. "I can mend fences," he said. "Raise chickens. I've done worse." She laughed, soft and surprised. "You'd settle down? With you, I would." She looked at their joined hands. "That's the first time anyone's asked me what I wanted." He tipped his head. "So what do you want, Arietta?" She met his eyes, clear and steady. "I want a home. I want mornings without fear. I want someone beside me who doesn't run when it gets hard." Silas nodded. "Then we'll build that." They didn't speak again. They didn't need to. When she leaned into him, he wrapped his arm around her shoulders and held her close, the fire warming their faces, the night finally quiet. And for the first time in a long while, Arietta closed her eyes and let herself rest. Late summer brought gentler winds and the kind of sunlight that softened the hard lines of the land. Arietta stood with her sleeves rolled and a rake in her hand, turning soil behind the cabin they'd raised together near the bend of the Sweetwater River. The logs were rough-hewn, the chimneys still missing a few stones, but the door swung true, and the roof held against the weather. Seth and Sadie ran along the creek's edge, with Eliza a few paces behind, her skirts wet to the knees, and a string of trout slung over her shoulder. Silas came from the North Trail, leading a mule burdened with seed sacks and a bolt of homespun she hadn't asked for. She leaned the rake against the fence post and met him at the gate. "You barter for all that?" she asked, brushing dirt from her palms. He handed her the bolt, traded the last of that dried venison and a set of hinges. The storekeeper's wife needed fabric for a cot quilt. She ran her fingers over the cloth. "You always give away more than you keep. You always make more use of things than I do." They walked toward the barn, the mule following loose behind. He watched her from the side, her stride easy now, the lines around her eyes softened. She noticed. "You've been quiet since the town meeting." He nodded. "Sheriff asked if I'd take over the patrol route for the Southern Pass." "You thinking of it?" "I was." He paused by the water trough, unlatching the mule's burden. "But I'd rather be here." She folded the cloth and set it on the bench. "You sure?" He looked at her, slow and steady. "I am. There's enough work on this land to keep me honest. And I'd rather sleep beside you than under a jailhouse roof." She didn't smile, but something warm passed between them, wordless and full. Inside the cabin, Eliza had started the fire and laid the fish over a cedar plank. Sadie brought in the last of the wild onions, and Seth carefully arranged tin cups along the table. Arietta took the knife in hand, cleaned the trout with swift, practiced cuts, and left the rest to Silas. When dusk came, they ate by lamplight, the glow turning the walls golden. After supper, the children lay curled near the hearth, Eliza reading aloud from a borrowed book while the wind rubbed gentle against the eaves. Arietta stepped outside, the door creaking behind her. Silas followed, pulling his coat tight. "I saw tracks up by the North Ridge," he said. "Deer, maybe 2 days ahead." She crossed her arms, eyes on the horizon. "You missed the chase?" He shook his head. "Not anymore. Not when there's something worth staying for." She turned to him. "You mean them?" "I mean all of you." He reached for her hand, calloused fingers sliding against hers. "You asked me once why I stayed. I never said it proper. You didn't need to. Maybe not. But I want to say it now." He stepped close, their hands between them. "I love you, Arietta. I love what we've built. I love who you are." She didn't move at first, her eyes steady on his. Then she said, "I loved you the day we left that ridge. I just didn't know what to do with it yet." Silas touched her cheek, slow and reverent. "What do you want to do with it now?" She leaned into him, her voice barely more than breath. "Keep it. Keep you. Every day we've got." He kissed her, then not rushed, not hungry, but like a man who had waited long enough to know what mattered. And she kissed him back, her hands at his collar, her heart steady and sure. They stayed like that until the stars brightened and the cold crept down from the hills. Then she pulled him inside, past the sleeping children, past the warm hearth, to the room they'd made for themselves. No words passed between them, but none were needed. Morning came with the smell of biscuits and the sound of Sadie laughing, bare feet thumping across the floor. Arietta stirred beneath the quilt, Silas beside her, his arm heavy across her waist. "You awake?" she asked, voice hushed. "Been listening to that laugh for a while now." She smiled against the pillow. "I never thought I'd hear that again." "You gave her a reason." They rose slow, dressed without hurry. Outside, the sky was clear. Eliza had started boiling water, and Seth was already in the field, trying to haul a bucket too big for him. Silas took it without a word and walked with the boy toward the trough. Arietta stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching the scene unfold. Later that week, they planted the last of the winter greens. A neighbor rode by with a pair of heifers and a grin, saying they'd done more with the land in one season than most managed in 3. They built a smokehouse by the barn and a second coop for spring. Sundays were quiet. They read, they mended, they sat in the shade with coffee boiled black and strong. Eliza saved to attend school in Green River, and when she left the following spring, she hugged Arietta so hard her shoulders ached. The children grew. Silas carved Sadie a whistle from pine and taught Seth to ride bareback. Arietta kept the ledger, the garden, the house, but she made time now to sit beside Silas on the porch in the evenings, her head against his shoulder, his hand resting easy over hers. They never spoke of the fire again, not because it didn't matter, but because they had risen from it. Years passed. Their hair silvered at the edges, their hands grew slower. But they kept to each other, to the land, to the quiet life they had chosen. And in every season that followed, they found that love, once earned, did not falter. It endured.